presenters to resolve the emotional patterns that disrupt performance. He helps clients neutralize triggers, strengthen confidence and courage, and access the flow state under pressure. He supports individuals who are navigating addiction by stabilizing motivation and commitment. Through individual work and webinars, he equips performers with the internal systems required to deliver consistent, high-level results. It's a pleasure to have our guest here with us today, and I speak of Tom Rohrer, PhD, so he is officially Dr. Tom Rohrer. Thank you so much for being with us today, sir.
Thank you, Alison. Nice to be here.
Awesome, sir. Now, Tom, you have worked with performers in some of their most intense moments. What's that one experience that you can think about that showed you just how much the mind is able to shape performance?
Well, in almost every level of performance, certainly in athletics, but also in entrepreneurship and doing a presentation, is that there's a lot of people have a skill level, right? And the difference makes is where people are, they control their mental emotional states. The people that blow it, I mean, you see it a lot in gymnastics, where you think these athletes have been practicing the same skill over and over, and yet they miss it. What's the difference? The difference is people who can stay in the mental emotional states, commonly called flow, being in the zone is the athletic term commonly. We all have been there, but we don't know how to duplicate that. We all likely have seen or witnessed a talented performer who struggled with the expected performance level. I mean, we have had that. I certainly have had. In fact, that's one of the reasons I got into this field, because when I was first playing basketball in high school, and when I get in the game, suddenly I would start double dribbling. And I knew how to dribble the basketball. That was a pretty simple task. But when you start basically handing the ball to the other team, every other time you get the ball in your hands, the coach tends to take you out. And soon enough, you're not playing basketball anymore. And so we now see that kind of a behavior or skill inhibition is typically called the yips today. The twisties in gymnastics and such. It's not being able to do a skill that you know how to do. Right? All been there, all done in various ways. But public performers, when they get into that, it's so apparent, not only to them but other people, that something's gone wrong. Commonly, in my experience, there's an underlying issue, what I like to call an unresolved emotional or mental emotional issue. It doesn't have to be a severe trauma. It can just be a buildup. And it can go back to things like starting with, our first sweetheart breakup of a first relationship, and then other things get linked to it, and it's a stacking of a lot of small things that happened, right? In some cases, it's a huge trauma that happened. But I've come to the conclusion I don't think anybody can make it to 18 years old that hasn't had at least one moderate level trauma, what we call small t trauma. So, and if it's then identified, or you think, well, things happen. And that's a great attitude. And a lot of people do that. They just kind of go, well, things happen. Let me turn towards what I want. And it never really, maybe ever, it causes them a problem. But for many people, it does. And when people get into things like slumps, they think, oh, could well be trauma-based. And that's what I call the first phase of the work I do with most people. So it started with my double dribbling, and then 20-some years ago, when I went through a sports psychology program, I started looking back, and finally, about 8 years ago, I finally figured out the trauma that would trigger that behavior. I never got it. I knew the trauma happened, but I didn't know it related to my double dribbling.
Excellent, Tom. And I'm appreciative of how you have shared your transition into your present occupation at present, and those practical insights that you have shared, because you have allowed persons to appreciate factors that impact performance, because you have mentioned various areas, and then you have showed how it transitions into our daily lives. So I'm certain that our listeners or viewers will be able to appreciate that. Now, from your professional experience as a doctor, when a performer, let's say, they suddenly freeze, or there is something, or spirals, right? What's that core mental mechanism that you recognize that drives that particular reaction?
These things are as unique as that individual is. It can be more of one thing or less of another, more of another. The inability to stay focused on what it is that is going to help them succeed is going to be therefore different. There's a three-pronged way of looking at situations, negative and positive situations, and it can be applied generally, but I typically think of it as being when somebody is referred to as optimist, or a person that sees the glass half full, they commonly call it, or a pessimist, somebody who sees the glass half empty. It's the same glass, the same situation. How personal does a person believe that the situation in those? How much do they feel they caused this to happen or didn't cause it to happen? How much of their life will be affected by this situation, whether positive or negative, and how long it will take to change it back. Well, that for the positive thing will slide back into more normal, and where the negative will work its way out. An optimist will look at a negative situation and say, but I didn't cause any problem, or what I did shouldn't have happened that bad. It's just affecting this one area of my life, and I'll get another job or I'll whatever soon enough. Whereas a pessimist will say, oh my God, I screwed up. I caused this, not even taking into consideration maybe other factors that I had no control over. It's ruining my life, and it'll take me forever, and I'll never get a job that good, or never be able to get back in the top 10 or whatever it might be, right? And those three ways of looking at those things are huge, right? And so that's a major, well, why do people become pessimists or optimists? I haven't heard a really good reasoning on that. One of the things that can happen is if people have enough negative things, if the family of origin they grew up in were very pessimistic, or we're always saying things like to the kid, good, you're never going to make anything of yourself, etc. How could they not influence that kid? Now, some people will look at that and say, my parents are stupid. They've never done anything with their life, and I'll show them or such. And they do great things, and they become resilient. They become very successful. And I have yet to see. I mean, it's not no, but what exactly the difference, other than the obvious. They just decide to see it differently, right? And so that's a major factor. And then not being defensive, looking at the situation. What part did I play in it? Because the fact is, we probably played some, even if it's tiny piece, of why it was we lost a job, didn't get a contract, didn't do as well in the presentation as we wanted to, etc. And what was that? Remember the man my undergraduate degree was in Michigan State, and the head of the educational psychology department told a story. I'll make this brief. And he said he didn't do well on the entrance exam to graduate school, and the counselor said, you should feel blessed you got you got through your undergraduate. Just go about your life. And he started thinking about it. I thought, I was sick most of the week before that, blah, 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 blah. Went back, took it again, aced it, whatever it was, 20, 30 years later. He's the head of the educational psych department at a major university. Gee, I guess he wasn't stupid, right? And those kind of things happen all the time to people, right? The fact is, if I were to say one thing is, everybody has so much more potential than they think they do that it's really ridiculous. I once had to read a book for abnormal psych class written by a 17-year-old Down syndrome kid. No help from anybody. His parents were told to put him in an institution to forget him. And he could read, write, type, and every page had a typo, maybe more than one, but you understood what he was saying.
Yes.
He told his story.
Amazing.
My God, what are the rest of us capable of doing? They have 10 times that amount of intelligence or ability. Maybe it's other kinds of skills. Maybe it's music skills. We have the idiot savants who are monumental artists and can't tie their own shoes.
Excellent, excellent. Really, really great experiences that you have shared there, and cases that so many of us can relate to. Now, you talk about emotional patterns that interfere with execution. What's one pattern that can stand out from your professional experience that you see most often in athletes or performers under pressure?
Not being able to be in flow state. And there's a lot of people out there saying, oh, you can't teach the flow state or the zone state. Yeah, you can. Now, there are people who I think it's because they're fairly rigid in their approach, because it's very similar to the state of meditation. Mm-hmm. Your audience, listeners have been a meditator or know what it's like to go into that kind of altered, somewhat like a sleep state. They know how to do that. That translates to flow state really well. It's just letting go, allowing, trusting your training, trusting your skill sets, instead of getting in your head and saying, I got to remember to do this, got to remember to do that. They hold the ball like this. There's no way. There's no way anybody can do that. If you are prepared, you're doing what you're doing, just breathe, relax. Just take a second and say, the quickest way to change your mental emotional state, ideally relaxation, is to breathe in quickly and breathe out slowly. And then do some kind of a stretching, kind of listen to some music that there's a technique which is used in polyvagal theory work, which is about stimulating the vagus nerve, which causes us to relax, causes our nervous system to relax by just humming, right? And you can hum something like Om, which is a transcendental meditation technique. You can use Ah, which is a more spiritual kind of concept, or maybe a song that you really like that always makes you feel good. Breathe in quickly, then Ah, and it'll relax you, right? And just go into that, allow, just relax, allow. You got this. You've been practicing. Now, if you didn't, then that's a different story. That can be much more difficult. But most people that go into something significant, they have practiced. I mean, when I practiced it many times. And if the pressure was off, they just do it, right? Well, don't put pressure on yourself. Don't get into, oh my gosh, I need this money, or this is a tough people. They're just people. If you do your best job, that's all you can do. Right? You can swing the bat, and the common story about how many times Babe Ruth struck out. He struck out a lot, right? And most big hitters strike out a lot. There are many skill sets that are like, when people do things perfectly, it's rare, right?
Yeah.
You can make a mistake here or there, and it should be fine.
Excellent, Tom. And you have made it so attainable for those who are listening as well, to recognize that in the process of them learning, how to cope, especially when they're under pressure, you're helping them to see, okay, it's a natural part of life when you face pressure. Yep. And I'm certain that these exercises, practical exercises that you have shared, simply and effective exercises will make a huge difference. Now, you help clients access what is known as the flow state. What's one practical thing you find that an individual can do right before stepping out to increase their chances of hitting that state?
Okay. Practicing meditation is going to be a big one, but if that's something that people want to do, I can say I think it would be surprising to me that everyone in your audience has had at least one experience when they were in flow state, and they were relaxed, things went well, they didn't get in their head and think. When you can go back and reconnect to that, what does the body sensations feel like? What picture can you create in your mind's eye? What are the emotional feelings? What are the body sensations? Maybe even taste and smell. And I'll add one more thing. If you can be in that experience of when you were flowing, when you were kicking the ball, or the words were just flowing out of your mouth, and people going, "Oh yeah, that's really great." In a presentation, for instance,
amazing.
Be in that experience, and then ask yourself. Usually, obviously, just by opening your eyes. I like being with my eyes closed. Open your eyes up and go, "Where am I looking?" And if it doesn't come, most people can be pretty quick to go, "I'm over here someplace, or down here." And if that doesn't work, just stay in that experience and look over here, 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 and do kind of a matrix thing. Then up there, and eventually go, yes, when I'm looking over right in here, it's the most connected, it's the most intense. That's what's called a brain spot in an approach called brain spotting. And we describe to you what we call self-spotting. And when you can make that connection to anything, I mean, literally anything is the thing, you can connect to it, right? And so you go, yeah, I like to think my success spot is like just right at dead center. Right? And so when we can find that and connect to it, we can make use of that, right? And that in a brain and body helps us connect to that state, in this case, flow state or zone state. It can be done with literally anything at all, right?
Excellent.
Did I explain that clear enough? I know I said it pretty quickly, but it's as simple as that seems. It really is.
Awesome, Tom. And as we wrap up here, for someone who may be listening, for that individual who keeps, let's say, getting in there, for that individual, who is listening and they need to really grasp something here, especially today, what's that one thing that you, especially Tom, from your professional experience, what's that one thing that you want them to start doing today to help to structure their lives in approaching various situations?
Again, it's going to depend on the more details. In general, I'd have to say the thing that probably is the most valuable is, you can call it quiet time, contemplation, meditation. Just sit quietly. Maybe you play some classical music, which we refer to as 4/4/4/8 time music, but just sit there and relax and just listen, right? And listen to your thoughts. If they're crazy, you go, oh, just let it go. If it seems like it's a valuable thought, you can ask questions, you can explore it more, but just sit. And I think that one of the most valuable concepts is to ask and then listen. And that can be seen, identified as spiritual, psychological, it doesn't matter. If we ask and keep asking and keep asking, at some point in time, and whether we believe it's our unconscious or our whole self and spirit, you're going to get an answer 99 times out of 100 at some point, right? Your unconscious is going to go, you keep asking that same question over and over again. You must want the answer. Here's the answer. I know that's happened for me, and it's caused me to make some major life changes when the answer finally came, because I finally went, oh my God, that's the truth, right? So asking and listening.
Asking and listening. Excellent, Tom. And thank you so much for sharing from your professional experience. There are so many cases, so many various viewpoints that you have shared with us today. And what I appreciate most of all is that you have allowed our viewers or our listeners to put in place practical solutions, from your experience, so solutions that they can apply in their everyday life. And it is well needed, especially during this phase where things are so unpredictable. So Tom, Dr. Tom, thank you so much for taking the time out to speak with me today. I sincerely look forward to talking with you in future. Awesome.
Thank you, Allison.
Right, you're welcome.